the most nerve-wracking part of the interview is the unknown questions that they are going to ask you about yourself and about your qualifications. They're the things that you just cannot predict. However, there are just a few that you can. So questions such as, can you tell me a bit about yourself? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? These are common questions, but they are ones you should be prepared for. Now, the big culprit is when somebody asks you what your weaknesses are and you actually give them a strength. That's kind of something that you can see through a little bit. I still think you should do that in a way, but I will get to that in a moment. So when somebody asks you to tell them a little bit about yourself, take that literally. Just tell them a little bit about yourself. I used to say, oh, well, I started temping 10 years ago, and then I was an office manager and a PA to the board, and then I was this, and then I was that, and then I moved, and I started to go through my history. And I either never really fully answered the question because then they started asking me something about the experience one of the experiences that I was listing, or I was probably boring them to death because there were 5 people that interviewed in front of me, 5 people after me, and they didn't have time for this. So now I don't do that anymore. I have brought it right down to something a lot more concise, in which I say that I have been an admin or an assistant for over 10 years, and I have held just about every role that can be held in our particular industry. I've been an office manager, a PA to a high net worth individual in a private household, an EA to one of the youngest female CEOs in the UK. That I have been a liaison for senior management, but at the end of the day, I am someone that wants to help people and help their businesses. And that's the part that I really love, that no matter if I'm working with leadership or I'm working with the general staff, where I was in charge of making sure that they were happy and content and retention was high, it didn't matter. I just really loved being able to help people, and that's why I do what I do. And I'll leave it at that. I let them then come in with the follow-up questions. I don't assume they want to know my entire work history because they have read my CV before I've gotten there, or at least I hope they have. Now, getting back to strengths and weaknesses. Now, as you'll see in the course book, one of the things I genuinely, truly say is that, or that I used to say, actually I could say that I'm better at this now, which was that I used to say yes a lot, and I used to say it to a fault, that if anything came across my desk, I would say yes. And then what would happen on the back end is that my time management would be all over the place, and that I would hold it inside and just try and stay on top of it all, and either I would work too many late hours, which could lead to burnout, or people thought I wasn't communicating because I was keep thinking to myself that I will get on top of this and then I'll give them an update, and then they were just like, why haven't you talked about this in 3 weeks? Why aren't you telling us? And not properly communicating that I was snowed under by my own demise because I should have set boundaries. But then I go in there and say how I have curbed this behavior by saying, now I'm much better at time management. I make sure that I schedule all of my tasks so that if somebody comes over and asks me for help with something, I can look at my schedule, decide whether I can fit it in or not. If I can't, then I can clearly tell them why I cannot, but give a suggestion on when I can attack it. If they're able to wait a week, or if I can work on it tomorrow, then I would be happy to help them. And so even though it is a weakness, I talk about how I combat it and how I've gotten better at handling it. Now, when it comes to talking about my strengths, I don't want to go into that here because this is not an interview situation, but I think telling people that you are comfortable, confident, that you are a people person, especially in our industry, that those are really important, but also make sure that you remember the job description walking in there, that you remember at least 5 key points of what they're looking for, and kind of bring that back into the interview during these questions. Make sure that you're kind of bringing it back around. Well, you said that you were looking for, I understand that you were looking for this, and I have done this before, and I'm really good at this. If you can turn a question around like something like what are your strengths and literally take it back to the job description. This is what salespeople do. They're called either mini closes or mini sales, where you get the person to agree, well, the job description said that you were looking for someone that is comfortable speaking with leadership. Is that correct? And they say yes. And you go, okay, great. So I have experience doing that. Give an example how you have experience doing that. And is that something you're looking for? You don't have to be so direct, but basically you're getting them to agree that these are things they're looking for and these are things that you have. Now, this is a common sales technique, and it's something that you should look into a little bit. Maybe you can Google or look on YouTube for some videos about this, but it is something that I think you can do by taking the job description, realizing what they're looking for, and kind of spin it. You can also ask them questions. So preparing is not just the unknown questions, but it's coming in with known questions of your own, what you are going to ask. Now, an interview goes both ways. And if it's not going both ways, then you're not asking, you're not prepared enough for the interview, or you're not confident enough for the interview. And that's something we can talk about and will talk about in the Influential Assistant course. And that's another common problem that comes up a lot with admins and assistants. Not that you shouldn't be going into interviews, but you want to go in there with your best self. And so as part of the interview process, they want to know that you are going to confidently attack this role. They want to know it's in safe hands. And so one of the ways that you can do this and show that you can, especially you can work with leadership, is by coming in and asking questions of your own. I like to ask how many people work there if I don't know already. Or maybe I have a number, but it's just like a LinkedIn number or a general number in their boilerplate. I want them to tell me, okay, well, what was your numbers last year? How much do you think you're growing? One big question I think everybody should be asking is, what are the company's goals this year? And what is the company trying to achieve? And if I'm meeting with the person that's going to be supervising me, managing me, being my principal, being my executive, I want to ask them what their goals are this year as well. It's a question that is often forgotten by everybody, whether you're an admin or an assistant, but it's a really important one and shows that you care. Now, you can throw in there because you've done some research. Maybe you saw in the news what they said openly that they're trying to achieve. You can kind of throw that in there, show your knowledge. Or you just leave the question hanging and say, I really want to know what the business's goals this year are and how I can help. And what your goals are this year and how I can help you achieve those goals. And it really shows the difference between someone that's just applying for a job and someone who's next level that's applying for a job when you care about the overall picture at a company. Now you might want to ask about, at this point, you might want to ask about flexible working. You might want to ask about maternity cover. Now sometimes these are things, or paternity or parent cover. These are things that you might want to ask of an HR manager. Also, this might be something you want to wait until your offer has come and you ask, can I see an employee handbook, or can I, that I will accept these offers contingent on, I will accept the offer contingent on seeing the company policies, because sometimes they will not share them with you until you are an employee. But, and sometimes it can be tricky. You don't want them to rescind an offer based on certain questions that you've asked, and they should not be allowed to do that, and you should technically be able to go after someone if they've rescinded an offer and you believe it's for that purpose. So sending these questions in an email sometimes is helpful because you have it in writing and have their response in writing. But this is the time for you to come in with the important questions that you really need to know to make an appropriate decision. And it could be literally about how many days off you have. Now, this is a really interesting one because a lot of companies these days are putting in paid time off. And before it used to be you had vacation days, holidays, and sick days. But now they're putting it all as paid time off. So you think that you've got all these, especially in America where we don't get as much vacation time as other countries. Like I live in the UK now and we get 4 or 5 weeks minimum. Where in the US, if you suddenly got 4 weeks minimum paid time, or 4 weeks paid time off, that sounds amazing. But when you find out that 5 days of that is your, or you get 3 weeks off in the US, that might sound amazing. But then you get 5 days of that is actually your, what would normally be your sick pay. And then you realize you really just have 2 weeks vacation, and it's not as exciting as you thought it was. You usually are thinking that you're getting, oh, that means I get 3 weeks vacation and then I have my statutory sick days. But now they're kind of putting this term on it, paid time off, for all of it. And that can sometimes include bereavement. It can sometimes include parental cover. And so I would really make sure that you look between the lines there, because sometimes a good offer cannot be as good as you think it is. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. So just make sure that you come in with your own questions. I also like to ask at this point, this is a really great way to connect with the person that you're meeting with, because when you're going into an interview, you're really selling yourself. And what they care about is they've already brought you in. They've looked at your resume and they think this person looks interesting and looks like someone that can do the job. Now, when you're sitting there, you just want to show them that you are competent and you are likable. They are more likely going to hire someone. Think about yourself. Think about your own. Say you had your own company and you have two people there that can have the exact same experience. One of them is a bit of a drip and one of them is super friendly and nice. Which one are you going to hire? Likely the one that you feel you are going to get along with more. More likely the positive, bubbly person. Unless you yourself are quite reserved, maybe you'll like the other person. But they're looking for the person that they are going to get along with and they think they can work with and is a similar vision as they do. Now, what I like to do here is I like to try and do anything I can to go off topic. So usually I do this as soon as I meet the person and start walking in to the room, or as soon as I meet them right away, I start trying to find a way to connect with them that doesn't necessarily have to do with work. So I will look around the office and say, this is amazing design. Do you know who did this? Did you pick any of this out? Or I'll compliment their shoes. Shoes are pretty safe to compliment on as far as clothing goes. Or I'll mention something about my kids and see if they offer to talk about their own children. Or I'll mention that they want a dog. Do you have any pets? That's something you can ask that's not too personal. I'll tell them that I had a really great weekend, that I don't usually get to play video games, but I got to play them with my daughter. Do you like video games? Just something that gets us connected on a different level, or a level outside of work, where we are just talking and being a little bit more informal and being chatty like we would in a normal setting outside of work. And you just want to you can kind of tell when you're going back and forth, when you're making that kind of connection. And I usually find that I make that connection when I'm talking about something other than work. Now, this really needs to come from an organic place. If you are trying to force it into the conversation, it doesn't work. If you're having a hard time finding a way to bring it into the conversation, one of the questions I like to ask is, when it's my turn to be asking questions, I will ask, well, how long have you been working here? Or if it's the CEO, I'll ask them, when did you start the company? Why? Can you tell me why you started the company? What do you like best about it today? Like, I want them to tell me, and I want, where usually in an interview you're talking all about me, I want to talk about you. I want you, I care about you. I want you to tell me about how you see this company and give me a better insight. I'll ask, why did the last person leave? I will ask what they feel this role needs. Outside of the job description, what are they really looking for? But just in a way that I'm making a connection, I'm getting them to tell me more about their expectations, about their life, and we're making a connection in that type of way. And as long as we're getting on during that, then they can see that I'm someone they might want to work with, that if we're getting along well, then that's a positive thing. And even if I have less experience than the person before me, again, if they got on with me better than the next person, I'm more likely to get the role if I can show that I'm someone that is quick to learn and committed and can do the job, even if it takes a couple of weeks to kind of get me up to speed. So those are my tips on how to prepare for the interview and getting your questions aligned so that when you come in, you've got some good answers, some good questions, and you're ready.